There are two very narrow exceptions as to where the veto would remain, which is if it says that opening up these services in this way to foreign competition, etc., would create mayhem. But the Irish government does not believe that, considering that already they are giving important parts of our health services to American corporations. Kidney dialysis is being given out to Fresenius, a fraudster company that was fined in 2000 an incredible $500 billion for fraud in the United States of America. They're given the cervical cancer testing to another company, Quest, also committed for fraud in the United States. So obviously the Irish government and other right-wing governments do not believe that by allowing multinationals in, they will create a crisis. But just because they are doing it already, we shouldn't just throw up our hands in the air and say, does it make any difference? It does. Because you can kick this government out and change policy, but if the veto has gone from Europe, the next government that will follow it can find itself obliged, just like will happen with the postal services and so on, to open up, for example, our health service in a mandatory fashion to these private for-profit corporations. That is not in the interests of Irish people, of poor people, of working people, of people depending on services, where we need more public investment, more democratisation, not handing them over to unelected boardrooms answerable only to profiteers in London or New York or anywhere else for that matter. Now, the government spokespeople have tried to pull the wool over our eyes in this regard. I had a big debate in Dublin Castle with Rory Quinn on these issues only last week. And after conclusively showing, chapter and verse, that this was the case, Dick Roach, the Minister of State for Europe, came in and said, the veto remains. It's a lie. It doesn't remain, and I hope that that is clearly borne out. And IBEC, the big business and employers confederation, is quite clear, as they said, a yes vote for the Lisbon Treaty creates the potential for increased opportunities for Irish business, particularly in areas subject to increasing liberalisation, another word for privatisation, such as health, education, transport, energy and the environment. So therefore it is quite clear that the thrust of those leading the European Union is for more neoliberal policies, more opening policies to assist further the control of the major transnational corporation, the 40 biggest companies, for example, which are organised themselves together in the European Round Table of Industrialists, which have massive influence with the right-wing EU Commission and indeed with member states' governments generally. The last point, Achorde, is this, and I've only 2 or 3 minutes, but maybe I'll develop it later. Totally false claims are being made by the Labour Party and the leadership, or some of the leadership of the trade union movement, for the Charter of Fundamental Rights being put in as part of the Lisbon Treaty. They are attempting to give the impression that a scandal, that the scandalous exploitation of migrant workers, for example, would be automatically outlawed by virtue of this particular change. That is absolutely incorrect. Number one, we do support and want all the freedoms and the rights that are to the benefit of working people in this charter or any other charter. But these rights are often aspirational in any case. Listen to what it says about health, Article 35. Everyone has the right to access to preventive health care and the right to benefit from medical treatment under the conditions established by national laws and practices. That has been in operation for 7 years, but does that stop old people spending days on trolleys in our hospitals? It's just written on paper. And it's quite clear that the Charter itself sets down that the rights that it upholds are limited. And they're limited in particular by virtue of rights given by Europe to other groups, particularly business. And this has come to a head in recent years in a number of celebrated court cases between workers taking industrial action, strike action, to stop a race to the bottom to stop migrant workers being exploited, for example in Sweden and most recently in Germany, where a Polish subcontractor was paying 50% of the construction rate in Lower Saxony in Germany. And when it went to the Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice says the company has the right to do this, and therefore puts their rights to profit and to set up business before the rights of workers. That judgment and the Laval judgment, which was a similar one in Sweden, quite clearly referred to the Charter of Fundamental Rights, so it was already in the minds of the European Court of Justice. But that again is a right-wing neoliberal body in terms of its ideas, and therefore just simply appending the Charter to Lisbon does not change that fact one iota. And entirely false claims are therefore being made that this will be a huge help to workers to root out exploitation. Working people can only depend on themselves and on their self-mobilisation within their unions, within their organisations, to root out exploitation, to organise and unite migrant workers and Irish workers and European workers generally with a view to doing that, to using the strength and the power of the working class like Larkin and Connolly and the great men and women who founded the movement did, not going cap in hand to bureaucratic people in Brussels hoping that they will do it. Therefore, our alternative to all this, we say vote no. We don't say vote no to withdraw into the Atlantic and pretend that the rest of Europe and the world doesn't exist. We vote no with another alternative in mind. Our alternative is not the alternative of the Libertas organisation, which appeared recently, of millionaires and multimillionaires and campaigning, they say, for a no vote, which in fact wants a capitalism more red in tooth and claw than what already exists. That is not us. Our alternative is of a Europe that is run by and for working people themselves, democratically, where the resources are controlled democratically and used democratically for the benefit of working people generally throughout the European Union, where the armaments industry is stood down, where that obscene wastage is cast aside, and the massive human resources in the armaments industry wasted are instead used to resolve the problems of humanity, to give clean water to the hundreds of millions of people who can't drink clean water at the present time. What an obscenity that instead of doing that, they're putting more and more money into more research to create even more horrific weapons. So our alternative, our no if you like, is a very, very big positive for a different Europe and for a different world, one that is run in the interests of working people, of poor people, rather than the interests of the corporate giants and the big business people who dominate Europe at the present time.